I think we have a quorum and it's after 3 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's see, reading the statement pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner. Join the Zoom meeting at the URL listed in the agenda. No in-person attendance of meeting members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship and despite best efforts, we will post on the Westborough Public Library's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting will be recorded. I believe it's being recorded right now. Correct. Okay. So I see no members of the public. Am I missing anyone?
I don't think so.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. So let's go on to the committee mission statement item. As you may recall, at our last meeting, I actually suggested that we get ourselves a mission statement because our mission had changed substantially since the past town meeting. I did develop one. I think you all saw it in the email before the trustee meeting, the library trustee meeting, and the trustees accepted it with minor modifications. So that's now our official mission statement. I think you got it by email. I can show it if anyone's interested, but if you have it, not necessary. Also, if anyone has comments, if there's something vastly wrong with it, we can go back and ask the trustees to change it. Until that happens, it is what it is.
No, I like it. It leaves it open too by saying that, planning and oversight of capital building projects for the library. So it's one or many, and it encompasses everything.
I was purposely trying to leave it pretty open so that we didn't tie ourselves down and have to go back to something, but still capture what our actual mission is, or at least what we think our mission is. So, okay.
To start the action, I'd move to accept as it's drafted.
Emery, second.
I don't know that we actually need to vote this because this is something dictated by the trustees, but we might as well approve what the trustees have given us. So, Maureen?
Amy, yes.
Ed Baldwin, yes. Pete?
Dan Beck, yes.
Walter?
Leslie, yes.
Al?
Gordon, yes.
Bob?
Petroselli, yes.
John?
EO, yes.
Bill?
Lenine, yes.
Lee? You're muted, Lee.
Emery, yes.
Okay. Vertex and LPA, do y'all have any questions or thoughts about it? Okay.
All you.
Well, yeah, that's what I figured, but
Tell us where to go. We go.
Okay, so now we get to the part that's not all us, discussion of pricing proposals, LPA and Vertex. Maureen, why don't you take the lead for this discussion, if you would?
I'm gonna lob it right over to John or Eric, whoever would like to go first.
I'll go. We'll go first. Basically, guys, what we prepared for you was essentially a carbon copy of what we did for you for the first job, and basically just showed a rate increase for the year. So it's, as you know, we work on time and materials. I think that we had given you an estimate last time of 97,000. I think we worked to about 95,500. So it, regardless of the time that we talked about, we were able to stretch that fee right up until, through a second town meeting effort. So worked out great. So, the new proposed, do you want me to put it up, Maureen?
Sure.
Yeah, hold on. Wait a second. Can you give me okay to share?
Yep, I did.
Great. Bear with me 1 second, guys.
This sounds like we have some gaps in the floor. Do that again here.
Okay, so we.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you see that okay, everybody?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically what we did is we, we start with a schedule. We look at this effort, basically would start in February and would go through October, because identified that's the goal, to get to a town meeting with a, you know, an SD number to be able to then attach a design budget to then be able to get us through design and then, you know, come back to a subsequent town meeting with construction dollars. So we carried basically what we carried before, you know.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the goal of this is not to come back with a construction estimate?
I think my understanding, Walter, is that you don't have the money to go anything more than a schematic design construction estimate.
We don't have any money right now. So we are going to go to, I mean, I don't want to distract too much from this, but in my opinion, we're going to go to town meeting and we should ask for enough money to then come back and do the construction.
Okay, so
I don't see us asking for enough money to go back in October to ask for money to do a design when we just, that doesn't make sense to me.
So a couple things. So this budget that we put together gets you to the same place that you ended the last effort. Okay, gets you to a town meeting asking for money for basically the whole project.
Okay.
It can be either or, really. Frankly, I don't know if you guys have had thorough enough discussions on that yet, but it gets you through schematic design, gets you that initial cost estimate for the scope of work that you want to do. And then what do we do from there? Okay, are we going to go and get are we going to take that number in October and have to live with that number for another year until the design is done to then put it to bid? Or are we, or are we going to do the other way? And again, you don't have to answer that now. Or the other way is we go and get more money to do a full design and come back with bids in hand. So that's kind of the difference. So, and we didn't really contemplate, did you want to bring are we bringing a CM in? Are we going to go through that process again? We can, certainly can, but that's again, another question. But regardless, we're pricing this for that same effort. We're doing the same effort all over again for a new scope. That's kind of what we've put together, and we've put that together in a 9-month window moving forward.
And the scope is just a renovation,
It's
because I missed
whatever.
that.
Yes.
Okay, I missed the interim.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep, and it's
Thank
in
you.
line with, and again, I wasn't at the last few meetings, so it's in line with that kind of line by line scope that you did with Eric and LPA, kind of walking through and saying, these are the things we want to address when we do get started.
So I don't know, because I'm not from the construction business. I don't understand this completely, but what I understand is we want to go back to town meeting with us, what we would consider a solid number that would cover the cost of this renovation.
Okay,
A repair, if you want, whatever we're going to end up calling it. And I don't know how to get that. And to me, if that meant we don't go back till a year from now with the right number, that makes, for me personally, more sense than coming back in October.
Let me jump in for a minute,
more money.
if I may, Walter.
Yeah.
The problem we have is that getting to construction documents, which is where you get the real number. The design part of that is going to cost in the range of $1 to $2 million.
And that's what we should go ask. The schools are all asking for 12% of a somewhat gross estimate of what the building cost would be to come back with a real design.
Now, I'm going to ask you this from the political perspective. Actually, Bill has his hand up. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, I think Walter's question is good, and John's answer verbiage is good. My question was going to be, I see the scope. I don't see the scope. John, you talked about it. You say it's from before, but there are some questions that were coming up. If we can take the previous scope and even say it's a modification, put some bullets so that we have something to go to. And I think we're in better shape by not just you've taken a direct approach rather than a percentage like the school and I like this much better.
Yeah, so as an example, Bill, I mean, I'll be frank with you. It's whether you're gonna do the $24 million project, which got defeated, or a $12 million project. You buy us by time. I don't care what you're gonna build. My fee's gonna be largely the same. My fee doesn't move with cost of construction. It's with how long do you need me? You know what I mean? So, or if we were gonna triple the size of the project over the next 9 months, doesn't matter. We're still kind of in there for the same whatever. Now, obviously, that's different with LPA. They've got consultants, drawings, layers of drawings, quantities of drawings, like their stuff moves, with the size of the construction, just because of the virtue of the level of effort. Our stuff, mine and Eric's and Steve's time is kind of the same. So again, these are all great conversations because, strategy, to Walter's point, is key, right? What do you, we're going to go back, and what are you asking for? Typically your MSBA school projects, the one where they participate, you ask twice. You ask once for money, feasibility and schematic, and then you come back and you ask for the whole shooting match, everything. Kind of like we were doing with the MBLC with the library. We ask for it early. The other option is you ask 3 times. You ask once to get started, feasibility, schematic. You ask the second time to get your design done, and then you ask a third time for the construction dollars, bid in hand. You go to the town meeting and say, I know it's going to cost X because I went out and I got a number for you, and here it is. So this isn't an estimate anymore. This is, an actual number. The problem is, do people, you need the buy-in for that, right? Well, here are the library guys again, and they asked for X and they asked for Y, and here they are for another crack at the egg again. But so there has to be kind of a community buy-in on the approach. We can certainly do it with 2 asks like we did last time. The difference with that is that second number that you're going in with really is full of contingency, is full of the what ifs, because you don't have a fully baked design. Again, you're going to have a design that goes to 10%. So to Walter's point, if you're going to wait, it's going to take you time. And to Ed's point, you're going to have to raise a lot more money than a couple $100 grand. You're going to have to raise a couple $1 million to get you through the whole design process. So
all I'm asking for, John, is a summary of what you said up front.
The
so
scope.
That we have a bulleted scope of what this covers. That's all.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, so I didn't prepare a scope statement because in my mind, we're going to do whatever you guys want to do. If you're going to do an 8 million or 12 million or 14 million, like that's more of the scope of work. It's going to come off of what Eric and Christina prepared.
Understood, John, but we have to answer to the public all the way along. We've already invested in meetings, and they're asking what's the new one. So if you just put a bulleted scope and say it depends on what LPA does, that's fine.
No, that's fine. We'll add that. We'll add that.
Bill Lanane's old 3-legged stool. You've got the cost, you got the time. I just need a bulleted scope.
You got it.
Sean, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Ed, thank you. I think, didn't the MBLC just change their process recently? And I know it used to be what you're saying, you do the assessment and you get money for that, and then it was sort of a multi-step process, and they've really contracted the process. Anybody here, can they explain what the new process is that the MBLC is using?
Maureen, do you want to take that?
I don't think they're doing anything different related to the construction, Sean. It's just to the awarding of grants. So they're going to award the same municipality the money for planning and design and for construction, and they'll be awarding in the neighborhood of 5 grants. But
No, but meaning more that it used to be you went and you got the grant for planning and design, and then you had to come back to get the next grant.
Right.
And now it's a single grant.
Correct.
So they've kind of compressed the time frame. So we're talking about, hey, you come for planning and design and then you come back for construction. That's not how the MBLC is doing it anymore, correct?
Yes, but it's not the same thing that we're talking about here, because what we're talking about here is how how we have to do municipal construction. And what they're talking about is just their mechanism for funding their grants. They'll still have to do the same thing that we're doing, do their feasibility study, schematic design, and then their design documents and their estimating all along the way.
Okay, but you are, I'm assuming, starting with some sort of swag as to the total cost of the project.
I imagine so that would come out of their feasibility study right at the beginning.
I think that's sort of what we're talking about here.
So just to be clear, I don't think we're looking for an MBLC grant for this. I think
Nope.
they would want, okay.
Right, but
Okay,
just
cool.
saying the process, I think because construction costs, probably because they've been moving so quickly, everybody's been looking to contract the process, right? Let's face it, the issue was the length of the process. And then we had a pandemic and costs exploded, right? I mean, that doesn't happen. You know, we're not having this conversation and we've got, you know, shovels in the ground pretty soon. So
Bob, you've got your hand up.
So I was just, following up on John's explanation. So we're looking at either a 2-step or a 3-step process. And John explained, you can go back and ask 3 times. I wrote, first is the schematic design to fund that. Second, you go back at another time, maybe in October for the design development. And then the benefit of going back for a 3rd time is you have a solid number for the construction costs. Is that, and it's solid, we know what it is. Is that something that everyone is thinking that's the process we want to go to, as opposed to going to the 2-step process? Because if it goes to the 3-step process, yes, it drags it out. But I remember Bill Linane said the last time, we have to do a better job at communicating to the public exactly what we're asking for and exactly what to expect at the next meeting, so there's no surprises. So am I to believe that we're going to be talking about whether we want to do a 2-step process or a 3-step?
We are trying to decide as well. I think we're trying to decide what we're going to ask for, if anything, at the March town meeting. And the amount we ask for at that point will have a lot to do with the process. I think what Walter is proposing is that we ask town meeting for enough to bring the design to the construction phase. So there's 2 ways you could do 2 steps. You can do schematic and design together, or you can do schematic and then you do design and construction together. And we're looking at option 1. I'm not sure which of those. John, jump in if I'm wrong, but okay, I've babbled.
The
Walter.
only issue, you're right, Ed. I mean, you could do it that way. The problem is all you have is a scope statement, right? So you have a scope statement that was kind of put together, by LPA, or if I'm mistitling it, I apologize. But when you guys went through that at the last meeting, you said these are the things we want to do. So what you would be doing is you would be putting a rough square. So here we go again, right? We'd be putting an estimate of a square foot price on something, and people are going to say, where are you getting this? And we're of course going to goose it up a little bit to make sure it's conservative, because we haven't torn any other holes in the building or anything else to look at it. And then we're going to take that number, and then kind of to Walter's point, 12% of it, whatever, that's a pretty decent number of that estimated construction number, and say that's the ask. So to Ed's point, that's an ask of about, it's $1 million. It's $1.5 million, $1.7 million, versus 100 grand for us, plus maybe 150 grand for LPA. We haven't seen their stuff yet. I don't know what the number is. Sorry, I don't want to misquote it, but it's an order of, it's a 0. I mean, you're talking about a 0 onto things for that. And so my only fear of going for that 2-step, doing this bigger price, you heard people's angst at the town meeting about where'd the renovation number come from? Where'd you get it? What is it? That number, guys, is no more baked right now than it was 2 months ago. So the people that said no to it then, are those people actually going to accept $1.5 million to a $2 million ask when we haven't had the time to study it? So it's like, I almost feel like you might have to do the study And then we can kick this idea around about one more ask or one or two more subsequent asks. Once we can get in and let LPA actually do a study of this renovation that nobody thought we were going to do. You know what I mean? Actually get some good traction and understanding so that when we do go to that subsequent ask, well, how do you know? Well, we looked at it. We actually had an estimator estimate it this time instead of something that was done, you know, back in when the first grants submission went in, you know, and then we escalated it 7 times to get to that number that nobody believed at the 18 million for the renovation. So that's, I don't know if, and it makes it, I don't know. I just think it gives more possibility of success because we haven't studied the renovation enough yet. I mean, I'll let, you know, lots of hands, maybe let Eric chime in for a second about his thoughts.
Let's start with Walter. He seems to be first in line. Go ahead, Walter.
Okay, so I think there's 2 choices. One, I generally sense we don't know what we're gonna do in this repair yet solidly enough to probably go back and ask for the big number, because I think you'd have to, the ones that are coming in and looking for the design, I think they're generally well structured. We're gonna repair the roof, we're going to do the ADA work on this building, and this is how much it costs. I think maybe we're too open-ended here on our punch list of what we're going to do. In that case, you could come back, you could come in and ask for a small amount to get, basically, for lack of a better word, our act together on deciding what exactly it is that we're going to design. And then you come back with design money, and then that has to come back with a solid number for the construction. So, I mean, maybe because ours is less obvious and needs time to develop than, you know, the Hastings roof has failed, we have to replace the Hastings roof. So maybe that's just more self-evident. I don't know. But the other ones are coming in with reasonably large numbers. And an advantage of that is you get that decision up front. If you're willing to spend $1 million on the design, are you willing to spend 10 million on the project? But my concern is the limited time to town meeting, and we have sort of a list that has some priorities that I don't think we're at that point where we could make a good case of this is exactly what we want to do, and so maybe we are better off with a short study to determine that, because it isn't fair to the trustees to keep funding the studies on trustees' nickel versus general funds.
Eric, you have your thoughts?
I did. Thank you, Ed. First of all, I just have to say that we have not completed our fee proposal. We are still working on it, so you don't have one in front of you today. We do have some uncertainty about the process and the level of detail that you are looking for on this for this project, and I think it's been expressed by some of the comments today about, you know, whether you go with a 2-step or 3-step process. We had originally proposed, I think, to go with a process similar to what was done for this 2021 reboot, if you will, where we revisited the addition renovation schematic design proposal and prepared really limited drawings. You know, we had architectural and site drawings, but all of our consultants did what we call basis of design narratives, and it's just a written description of the systems that were being priced. So it's very difficult to put exact numbers on that, and that was fine. That was fine for schematic design, but as John pointed out, there was a lot of question about where that base repair number came from. And talking internally in our office, we felt that it may make sense to go with a little more, a higher level of detail and have our consultants prepare, simple one-line diagrams for this first part of the proposal. And that would give you a little higher level of comfort with at least putting out an initial number on this. With new construction, in the case of a project that's mostly addition, which is new construction, it's easier to put a number to that than it is with a repair renovation project, which has a lot of uncertainties. So I agree with John's recommendation to go with a 3-ask approach. I think it's more responsible use of the town's money. I think that, ultimately getting in front of the town with a bid in hand and that having that dollar value is a positive thing. So that's kind of where we're at from our standpoint. And again, I apologize for not getting the feedback to you earlier. Just wasn't quite sure how to go about it, but I think it's best, discussed with the whole committee.
Okay. So it sounds to me, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, and I get it. I think coming off these other meetings, part of my concern is that we're going to sink some money into this and then people are going to come back with, oh, it's going to be that, if our numbers were anywhere in line, then they're going to come back asking us to then size what it'd be like to build new, or, it's sort of that they're going to try and move the, move the ball or whatever. So I am definitely for an initial amount that I mean, if we need to then come back for design, that's fine. And especially if design is basically a percentage of our estimated project cost, right? As long as we have an estimated project cost that was developed specifically for what we want to do here, I think I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, I think, but my concern, correct, is that if we put too much money forward, I don't want to put too much money forward if there's a certain portion of town who just sort of goes, ooh, that's also expensive. How about this or how about that? And it just sort of keeps getting kicked. The can keeps getting kicked down the road.
Lee? I'm not hearing you, Lee. It doesn't look like you're on mute. Still not hearing you. Anybody?
No. Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's got it. Yay. Okay.
Okay. So I agree with the 3-step because I think that gives us the most accurate amount of money we'd be asking for at any one of those spots. So we wouldn't have the criticism like you really don't know what your budget is. Is that correct? Okay. Then my question is, what about, I know we build in contingencies, but because we're doing a remodeling or redesign, renovation, we could end up finding only after we really started taking some things apart, a much bigger problem than we realized could be there. Now, how are we foreseeing how we deal with that, John?
So it's a great question. On the original budget we prepared, we carried roughly 5%, 6% because it's a new building. On this building, we'll carry 10 or 11. Basically, so if under the guise of a new building is new, what it is, construction is construction, you come up with things, we carry roughly 5% contingency. On a reno, we always double that, always. Now, that being said, we would also look in this phase, and I'll talk to Eric about it, is it's not just the cost for us and the cost for Eric, we would also want to make sure there's a little pot of money, either it's for reimbursables or otherwise, to have somebody come in and make some holes and patch some holes. And I don't just mean outside. I mean, actually look at, you know, all these things we were talking about connections and structural connections and upgrades and these kind of things. It's time to really kind of suss that out and figure out what it is. So we try to mitigate some of those possible contingency uses by knocking holes in things. And again, maybe not during business hours, or we close an area off, but we would actually recommend that through that process that we get a local builder, we'll get somebody to come in and, you know, cut the plaster out, look above the ceiling, like to truly figure out, you know, try to see some of those things we can't see, so that when the contractor does get on site, when somebody does start building this, we've hopefully, it's not the first time we peel back walls to understand what's there. Again, in an older building, sometimes 3 of the walls can be framed one way and the 4th wall can be different. It is what it is, but doesn't mean we have to look behind all 4 walls, but we would want to make sure that we have a plan through this SD phase. So again, the one other thing I was going to say, and I'll put my hand down, is if you're going 3, that's fine. If we find enough information, you can change your mind, guys. This isn't an end all be all decision here. We have 8 months to get to the next town meeting after this one, or, you know, 7 months, whatever, after that meeting to get there. If we learn enough, you can always change course, right? But part of this would be further investigation so that you can kind of solve some of those unknowns.
I'm going to throw out a few comments before I go to the hands that are up. One is the kind of investigations John was talking about, you know, so that we get some confidence of what's under the walls, behind the skin, and so on. It's definitely something I at least was envisioning as being part of this schematic design effort. Eric, I don't know if that got through and if it's something you're considering.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, it should be part of this. I mean, we really need to get in. Somebody needs to get in and look at the you know, the slate roof, for instance. You need to take off some slates, look at the fasteners, you know, really get an understanding of what's going on up there. Have the fasteners failed? Does the whole roof need to be replaced? Or are we just looking at selective repair? That was not really part of the scope that we were imagining that we would be doing in this, but I think that John's recommendation to have some money set aside for those sorts of tests makes sense. You know, there's other tests that would need to be done as well. So I agree wholeheartedly that you would want to supplement the information and, you know, really pin down some of those questions that we have about things.
The other point in my brain is that we wanted to, some of this I think is pretty mandatory, and some of what we asked for on your bullet points is sort of optional, or at least less required than others. And we want to be able to look at this and say, well, we just don't have enough money to rearrange the layout of the walls and create a children's room. So yeah, I'm making this up totally out of my head, and I wouldn't advocate that, I don't think. But we do want to be able to do some, I think we need to be able to do some picking and choosing at this early schematic design phase so that we can balance what the library needs with what the town's going to be want to pay for. That's just also one of our thoughts, and that's something that we would, you know, we'd want to get the schematic design that gives us all the options, and then in the course of refining it, we would come up with these are the options we actually want to do, and we would incorporate that in whatever estimates came up later. So sorry, back to the hands now, Bill.
Yeah, I support the 3-step process based on what you said. I'd also like to pick up on what Eric said in his previous statement, that the designs get to enough detail to support what you're talking about, Ed, where we can see where different potential, where we're thinking of where, as you said, children's room, all the rest of them. And the other point that I was going to bring up later That's important in my mind that we get it, because the select board, Sean can fill in the detail, have already said that they want to study various buildings here in the town in the future. So if there's 8 out there, can we make 5? If there's 7 out there, I forget the numbers at the point, but there's an awful lot out in the town. So we, as a committee, if 1 or 2 of us, I'd be glad to be one, is attend those sessions and meetings to stay in tune with what's going on, and a little more coming from LPA, we'll be able to see whether we can follow and stay tuned with that. Otherwise, we're gonna get to the end of the, like we did in the past, we're not in tune with what the potential of the town is saying. I'm not saying we change anything, but we need to stay in touch with what's going on.
Bill, can you clarify what you meant by they're looking at like 5 or they're looking at 7?
Yeah, forget the numbers, okay? But at the last 2 selectmen meetings, at the end of the meeting, there was discussion about, we need to look at what else the community wants for buildings. And you know all the various names they are, and they change the names and all the rest of it. Then along came, we need to do something with the country club. So there's a bunch of stuff out there that needs to be studied. And what I heard from, and Sean can correct me, is that they've begun to think about studying that, and it's in Christie's, let's call it lap, in her focus, to put together a committee to study that. So I'd like to stay in tune with what they are, and so that we don't get down the end of the pike here and say, like, whatever we wanted, and all of a something else is saying they're trying to bring it into whatever the numbers are, Maureen. Less buildings because you want to coordinate some of the things that the community has asked for. I'm not saying that we change anything, but if we don't stay in touch with what's going on, we'll get through our process. And the community will say, well, what about? That's already been studied and it's going to be included. So
Well,
the 3-step process, along with Eric's upgraded layout and design, helps us communicate to the public.
So Bill, if I understand what you're saying, the town, and Sean, correct both of us if we're wrong on this, but the town is considering putting together a town building committee or something to plan buildings town-wide, and make a strategy going forward, and then you feel we should be at least observers in that committee.
So I guess a couple of things. One is, at the last meeting, we did talk quite a bit about the golf club. And I think, that was in the local paper, and there's a lot of information on that. Essentially, an assessment was done of the building, and the building requires a significant amount of work. And so the thought was we're going to put together a group to assess that building and determine what needs to be done. I mean, it was a house. It was bought like 50 years ago from someone. The town took it over and has basically just been adding on to it since then. And it's come to a point where that probably isn't appropriate. So that's one thing. And I think out of that discussion, it just came a general talk of, okay, we've got this. What else do we have we need to talk about? We're getting an assessment done of the Harvey building. I don't know if folks are familiar with the Harvey building. It's on Phillip Street. I think at one point it was the high school, like
It was a school.
70 years ago or something. Lee, yeah.
Through 1 through 3, right up through the late 50s, I think.
Okay.
Or maybe it's
Yeah.
just 1 and 2, and 3 was in the one right at the end of Parkman. That's now the Y. 3 started there.
So as we're getting those done, there was discussion like, hey, we just need to evaluate, what we have, what people have expressed interest in. But at this point, I don't know that it's jumped up to a committee, but because it's also basically part of the master plan implementation. Right? So a lot of things then roll up within that. So I'd just say more to come.
I'm just saying we should stay in tune with whatever comes out of this, so that we
Yes.
don't get bitten in the end, go to a town meeting and ask for something that we're not understanding what is going on as it evolves.
Pete? So I was very quiet. Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna say two things. One was I endorse the three-step approach, and it's a little more painful to go to town meeting multiple times, but I think it maintains better control of the communications. And the second part of that is along the lines of the multi-building discussion going on in town and in the master plan. I endorse all of that too. I did have a question on the renovation of the current building. In the previous proposal that was not accepted, we were talking about it like a 50-year solution. As we talk about putting, let's say, $20 million into the existing building, are we thinking that's going to be a 20-year solution or a 40-year solution, or what? How long is that going to be the town library solution for us? I think it's a possible scenario, maybe likely scenario, that we're going to come up with an estimate, and it's going to be the $20 million-ish that was swagged last time, and the town's going to say, I don't want to put 20 million into that building. We got to step back. And 20 million, if it's going to be for 20 years, seems like an expensive building. And I think we should go slower with the three-step process because of that risk.
Good point.
Just a thought on that. There's sort of two ways you could think about the building lifetime. One is, how long will the mechanicals and the electrical connections and all last? We could put in a heating system that would work for 50 years and everything else that would work for 50 years. What is harder to predict is what the need for the building might be in 50 years. And we need to think about which of those we want to go for.
Yeah, and part of my question was, we've already identified the building doesn't meet the current service demands. And so when we patch it up, it's still not going to meet the service demands. So is it going to be 10 years before we get frustrated with that, or 20 years? There's going to be a point where the community is going to want to move to a different building, it seems to me.
Or in a bad case for libraries, it could be that everybody's fears about electronic libraries come true and that people stop using it. So, or we have to repurpose it entirely. Rain is face palming herself, and I would too, but I need to be a devil's advocate from time to time.
That's the wrong way to approach this. The whole scope of future libraries is not just ebooks.
Yeah. Yeah, we could very well be changing the mission, and that would change the whole design of what the library is, and trying to figure out what that's going to be 30 years out.
Well, are we trying to figure it for the next 10 years with this renovation?
Yeah.
Is that the limit of our vision, is to try to make a building that survives 10 years?
Seems like it should be longer than that.
Yeah.
That's the debate I'm trying to foster here.
I think, Pete, you're right, exactly, that all we're really doing right now is just fixing the mechanicals and the wiring and the roof and like all the problems that we have with ADA. It doesn't meet our programmatic needs now, and it's not going to meet them next year or in 10 years or in 20 years, because we presented a plan that met our programmatic needs for all of that time, and the town said no. So I guess it will meet, I guess I can say it'll meet our needs until the next round of people decide it's time to apply for the next MBLC grant to either expand on site or build new, or whatever the climate is in town at that time.
Is asking the town to spend $20 million for what you just said a good, reasonable ask of the community?
I think it is, because I think you can't let this building just deteriorate to the point where heating units are catching on fire and, just throw up our hands and, let it disintegrate. I don't think that's a responsible use of taxpayer money either.
That's
It
one
sounds-
of the reasons, sorry, I don't know, whoever that was.
That was me, Bob. I mean, the townspeople spoke. We had that vision of fixing it for the next 40, we mentioned 40 or 50 years. They rejected it. So they said, go back and just do the basic repairs. And that's what we're doing. So our charge isn't to like make the repairs to last for 40, 50 years. But I understand what Pete is saying. They're going to say, well, wait a minute, 20 years, $1 million a year. No, but that's what we're tasked with doing. I don't know what else we can do other than make those repairs and spend it the most wisely and most efficient way possible.
A lot of what I heard, a lot of what I heard was a great deal of skepticism on the $20 million to do the Band-Aid. And we're going to go and put substantiation around that with this first phase of the 3-phase. And then we're going to have the harder number, the firmer number, and we can have a new discussion with the community on that.
That's one reason I want to have options in there so that if push comes to shove, we can say, we're just we'll have a minimum. This is the stuff we have to do to keep the building running, and then separate that out a little bit from add-ons to improve the programmatic functionality or whatever, and at least sort of show. I'm not sure what the term is for what we would be demonstrating by doing that, but I think it would be a good thing to do. Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Maureen has a good handle on us not meeting the programmatic needs. However, I think when we presented that concept to the public, it hasn't been concrete enough in examples for them to understand. Because unfortunately, visually, the people that get up and say, well, I go in the library and it's almost empty, or there's, I say myself, there's plenty of parking on the front, right in front of the library. I think people's perception is we're lying about programmatic needs not being met. And we need to put some more objective, measurable data behind those things and then be able to explain, and this isn't going to change. We can't do this for teenagers right now. Teenagers really want it, but we can't do it. And it's not going to change when we do the renovation either. So understand, town, what you're buying and what you're not going to achieve by us just doing the renovation, along with, proposing what will improve with the renovation.
Walter?
Yeah, a couple points. One is, I think, Ed, I agree that, so I don't know that we're heading to be at $20 million. Maybe the answer is if we're just doing the necessary repairs or something, it's far less. And that might make sense or be more responsible of us even to suggest if we think that 10 or 15 years from now, you don't want to put in a lot of things that would, not have the life. And I think the town has, we say it doesn't meet the programmatic needs, but I think the programmatic needs are actually, the program is going to get defined by the space in the building we have, because that's your resource. So I think that might not meet the needs of the community at some point, but it is going to be what it's going to be what your program is, I think, in the short term.
I'd say also, I don't have a good feel for how many town residents, and in particular how many town voters don't use the library ever. And that group of people isn't going to care about the programmatic needs very much. So,
well, I don't think the programmatic part is almost not in this discussion because we're repairing.
Yeah, that's true.
We're trying to keep the lights on, the air conditioning on, and the building open. I think with these repairs, make it a little nicer. But the one that rearranged the whole building was defeated, unfortunately. Yep. So I don't know how much time on this justification you need to spend on programmatic. Okay.
I was just saying, if we bring that up at any point in the future, we need to bring it up with more visual meat behind it in a way. That's all.
Yeah. Got it.
Let me go back to what I think one of our core questions is. which is, do we want to do the the two-step funding approach or a three-step funding approach?
It's
we've
gotta be
been-
three.
It sounds like,
It has to
should
be
we
three.
should we have a vote on this? I mean,
Three.
I haven't heard anybody speak in favor of two since my initial reaction.
okay,
But
everybody
once
is-
I
everybody
understood
is
that we
saying
don't know
three.
what we're doing, it's three.
Yeah,
Yep,
and we-
3 for
yeah.
Lee.
Okay, so we have an informal poll here and everybody seems to like the three-step idea. Okay. So that's what we're doing. Now Eric also asked for some direction. I think he was asking for some direction on just how much detail we wanted to get on at the schematic design level, in particular whether we wanted to go beyond design narratives from the contractors. Let's talk about that a little bit if we can.
I think you need to get, so what's the next phase, right? The next phase is detailed design, right? That'll be phase 2. You need to have enough information to be able to solidly come in with a cost and a bucket list or whatever Bill was talking about, the list, that you can sell confidently the next phase. So that, and to me, that means having at least a very crude estimate of the total cost so you can estimate the design phase and a list of what has to be solidly designed. And whatever is needed to get to that, that's what has to be in the scope of this study.
Bill, your hands up.
Yeah, we could ask Eric or LPA to give us the quote that they're getting close to giving to us, and then at the bottom line, LPA puts a number saying to take the drawings to, and they could explain it to us in a brief paragraph, to the next level. And what percent, if it's 1%, there's no, if it's 25%, it's a whole different ballgame. But I think based on what Walter just said and what we have been saying as a committee, we need enough that we can tell the public what it's about. And you can't do it with one line diagram. I don't think.
Okay. Well, I think the one-line diagram would be for a detail like the heating system overall, but and we might get that to work with. Lee, go ahead.
It would help me if somebody would say, these are the items we take to the first meeting, these are the items for the second, and these are the items for the third, just to kind of re-clarify exactly what are we taking to each meeting.
So let me walk through it.
Step 3.
Yes, for the first town meeting would be schematic design. So we would bring the design to the same point we had in October, November for the renovation project. And as we sort of have a reasonable idea of what we were going to design, enough to get I'll say reasonably accurate cost. Then the second step would be, and that first step is where we make all of our big changes. We decide on what options to use. We choose whether to use a new slate roof or metal. I'm making stuff up here, but in particular, we decide, how much programmatic changes we make as opposed to the essential maintenance.
It's sort of like a scope as well.
So we would be nailing down the scope
Yeah.
for the design for the complete design phase.
Yep.
The second town meeting, we've completed that schematic design, and we now know we have a much better estimate. The schematic design gives us a reasonable estimate of the cost of the whole project and a good estimate for the cost of making a detailed plan, something that we could go out for bid. So at the second meeting, we've made those. So the first meeting, we're asking for money for the schematic design. The second meeting, we're asking for money for the detailed design development. And that the detailed design development gets us to construction documents and bid packages and all that. So at the third meeting, we're actually asking for the money to build the project.
Based on the detailed design.
Based on the detailed
Yes,
design. At that point, we would have, for that third meeting, we would have a very strong cost estimate. like contract level cost estimate. John has his hand up.
And just a quick clarification, that second part isn't just design development. It's basically the rest of the design. It's design development, construction documents, and bidding. It's kind of all
Okay.
it's everything else to get you to construction. So you could call it, instead of calling it design development, you could call it detailed design. It's the whole rest of the shoot and match to get you to bids.
Thank you. And I had the concept, but I don't necessarily have the right words for
Okay,
it. It's
okay.
good to get corrected.
Don't you have the right words?
Eric,
Just to kind of tag along on that, on John's comments, the third request would also include construction administration fees for both, LPA and Vertex, as well as the actual construction bid costs that you would have in hand at that point.
And contingencies.
And contingencies and, furnishings and all that stuff too.
And,
We just-
if we were still moving out, which is undetermined,
Yeah,
but if
that-
you did,
that-
that would have to be
exactly.
in the final phase too.
100%, Walter. In fact, we would need to, based upon kind of what we learned in this first phase, will kind of educate us, whether you're going to have to move or not.
but I'm
We'll
guessing
know
we
that,
probably
we'll know
are.
that early. We'll know that earlier as opposed to later.
And would the phase one be this March of 2023, the second step, October of 2023, and the final third step is March of 2024?
That seems like an
Sounds too
aggressive
quick.
timeline.
Yeah,
Does-
I was
does.
thinking
That's
that
okay.
getting the detailed design would take a year. Getting the schematic design might or might not be done in this 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
That's my gut.
Right.
Sean, before I get to you, Lee, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, Sean.
Hey, so thank you. So working backwards, we're looking to close the warrant on February 28th. So the select board will meet on the 14th and the 28th. I know the AFC will meet many times over the next month. So there's lots of opportunities there. But I don't know what that means for this group. Is there like 2 meetings to get this finalized before we feel the article is good, or do we think we can nail it whenever our next meeting is?
I think we're gonna probably need a meeting before the end of February for sure.
No, way
Because-
before that.
Yeah, like
We have-
probably as soon as we have the LPAA estimate, we should have a meeting because one of the other, and not to skip ahead, Ed, but one of the meetings that I already know I need to present to is the capital expenditures committee. And they're looking at a meeting on February 9th. So we will need to have a pricing proposal and have a meeting before or on the 9th so that I can present to them the evening of the 9th.
And then maybe another one after that, depending on what's required.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
Let's keep that in mind when we get to the scheduling the next meeting. Okay.
Yeah, I think we have to meet next Tuesday and have to have LPA, sorry, have something before that meeting in order to have a chance of this going to this town meeting.
That was my thought as well.
We're
Okay.
running out of time.
Let's see. So let me jump back to the question I was on before. Actually, let me ask Eric. Eric, did you get some guidance? Was that helpful in terms of the level of detail we're asking for? I think it was still something up in the air.
Yeah, that gives me enough that we can go back to our consultants and firm things up and put things together. We should be able to get you something before next Tuesday.
If you can do it, I think Bill's suggestion would be great, where we have one sort of minimal thing and one that goes into a little more depth and just give us an idea of the cost differential for that.
Will do.
Thank you. Lee?
Yes, I wondered, let's see. I wondered if John is the right person or not, but if somebody could put together the actions that will be brought at each one of those meetings, or the requests that will be brought to each one of the meetings, or what the content of each one of the meetings will be, that you just want to verbally, could you just write it down so we can actually look at it at our
What-
next meeting?
Yeah,
All the detail?
I'll take on the task of writing that down.
Want to do it, Ed?
And then, yeah, because right now, Vertex is, I don't know if Vertex is on the clock right now, and I don't
Oh,
want to ask
okay.
him to do stuff for
Oh,
free.
listen, don't worry about it.
Well,
Don't worry about
what
it.
I
I mean,
was going to do was say, I'm going to write it, and then I'll ask Maureen and you and LPA to review
Look
it,
at
to
it.
make sure we're being sensible and accurate and all that, because
Yep.
so hopefully that'll
Perfect.
have us doing sort of the heavy lifting, and y'all can apply the expert knowledge to it.
I think that's an excellent idea, Lee, because wherever we go to explain this, we're going to have to explain the 3-step process, and
Mhm.
you need a solid list, and you need all of us saying the same thing. So having
point.
an agreement on what this step is going to get us here,
Yep,
this
each
step's
step
going
is
to do
gonna be-
this, and this step's going to get this, and this is it's essential.
Thank you.
I have a question for John if there's nothing else. And on that, and John, the question is, you mentioned you're essentially putting the same level of effort into this as we did for last year's.
Yep.
Do you think is that going to be accurate? Seeing how sort of the situation, you're familiar with the library and all. Is there any opportunity is there a reasonable chance that you might not need as much effort at this point?
yeah, and basically what I would say is if we don't need it, we won't use it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, because we go ahead and find something crazy in there and suddenly we've got to rethink, redo, like there's still too many unknowns. It's really a whole section of this we haven't studied yet. But yeah, we're not here to burn hours, right? We're gonna, we'll be judicious with them as we have been, and stretch, if we've got to stretch it a little longer, we stretch it a little longer. I don't see it being an issue. To the point right now, not on the clock, but whatever you need. I mean, obviously we want to see something. We want to see something happen, and whatever we've got to do to help you with that, you've got to come to a couple meetings. I mean, whatever, we're good. You need us to help present or, whatever.
Great. Bob.
Again, just forgive me for coming back to this. I just want to clarify my head, the timeline. So we're looking at step 1 probably would be October of 2023, this fall then?
We would ask for money in March and hopefully complete the step in October.
Okay, okay.
I don't
Is
know
that-
if we can do, actually, we should probably have Eric or Christina chime in on that, of how long that work would take. Because I don't want to say that we're going to go to the fall town meeting with a schematic design if that's not possible,
If that's
or,
not going to happen. Yeah.
yeah.
Eric, I don't know if you heard that question. So did we have an idea of the timeline that it would take for us to complete this either minimal or more detailed schematic design? You're muted, sorry.
I think initially we were thinking that the March to assuming that we get authorization and for schematic in March town meeting 2023, we could get that done by October, which is what, 6-7 months, something like that.
Keep in mind that town meeting isn't until the 25th of March. So basically it's April, you start, and to get to October town meeting, you've got to be done in September, as we found out.
Yeah.
I mean, probably beginning is, Labor Day. So that's why it might be aggressive, but
It might be, yeah, that might be a little bit aggressive.
So we might need to be at next spring town meeting with the.
I mean, I think it's fair to say, right, that it's also based on what you find, right? Because, it's not like they're going to work for 5 or 6 months and not share, right? Share info. So if seeing it along the way, as it's developing, I mean, I think obviously the important thing in there is there enough work that somebody can estimate, because everybody cares about cost, right? So we can kind of get an idea, options, menu, what's in, what's not, I mean, frankly, I don't even think some of the stuff you need to make final decisions on cost at the SD level, because the difference about doing something and its impact on design fees that you ask in step 2, it's much smaller than the actual cost of construction, right? So I'd say you let it play, and just, if people are talking about it, it's either October or March for, depending on what we find. And then it's probably, 10 months after that to do a full design. So it's probably if it's March, it's the following March. If it's October, probably the following October, right? I mean, that's probably a fair, I mean,
Right.
do you agree, Eric, that it's probably a year, from go to go to, to the bids?
Yeah, I think we need to look at it. I'm a little hesitant to commit. I think you're right. I don't think you need to decide that right now, other than the March 2023 town meeting. But we can look at that in more detail and give you kind of a timeline for things.
Yeah, I think as long as we come in and say it's, maybe if everything went incredibly well or quickly, it could be as quick as fall town meeting, but it also could be at the next town meeting. That's enough information for people, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lee, do you have a comment besides your thumbs up? You're on mute.
Your mic.
I'm sorry. We could always say, if we could do October later on, we could say, hey, we can actually do October, but we don't have to decide now. I'm sorry it took so long. I agree.
Okay. I will work that into the schedule come up with that Lee requested, and I'll try to get that get written and through the various reviewers in time for our next meeting. Okay. Is there anything else on the warrant article? I'm not seeing anything.
Not much there to comment yet. So.
Not yet. Okay. Maureen, can you tell us about the capital planning committee? You're on mute.
Just that I'm scheduled to present to them at 5:30 on February 9th. And they probably are going to be looking for some information about when we expect to be at future town meetings. So this will be helpful, the discussion we had today. And they'll need some kind of numbers. For the what I'm talking about is for the March town meeting, because that will lead to a discussion of the funding source for the design fees, whether it's free cash or raise and appropriate or something else.
Okay.
It's a Zoom meeting, so you're all invited if you want to participate or just listen.
Okay. Is it totally Zoom, Maureen, or is it mixed? Totally Zoom. Okay. Anything else on the capital planning committee? Maureen, could you you may have already done this, but you could send me and probably the group an copy of the Zoom invite for that if there's one.
It hasn't come out yet, but as soon as it does, I will.
Okay, thank you. Other building related discussion.
Two things, Maureen. Am I right that Zoom meetings, the state says you can't have them anymore? Do we have to think about having our own meeting? Is it March or sometime?
I believe it's May.
Okay, good.
Sean?
You can look at it.
I don't, but I can find out.
Yeah.
That's fine. And the other thing is, Sean, could you get a hold of Christie and have her get back to Maureen as whatever the glimmer or whatever it is for the study of other buildings, so that Maureen is aware of it? Well,
Yes, Bill.
I'm asking you as a member of the committee, not as a selectman.
Well, either or is fine. Study of other buildings.
I have one topic for building related discussion, which, John, I'm not sure if you know, Eric, I think you do. We actually had one of our heating, our fan coil units caught fire about a month ago now, which sort of woke everybody up to the fact that the building really is deteriorating. And you know, every month that we wait before fixing that kind of thing increases the risk that something will catch fire, that we'll have some kind of catastrophic issue. So for both you and Eric, I'm going to ask that you think about what do we need to fix right now, and what do we need to fix soon, as opposed to waiting for the whole process to go, because there's the risk that we'll pay too much if we'll have to do it twice if we do it too soon, and then there's risk that there'll be some kind of catastrophic failure if we don't do it in time. And it's
The only stuff, Ed, that it's not so much a question of too soon, right? Because you still got to look at a lot of stuff. But my concern from a timing standpoint just becomes you're having issue with your heating coils, right? We're talking about a process that's not going to basically allow for a new heating coil to be installed in that building for at least 18 to 20 months. Like that's,
Yeah.
let's face it, we're talking about a study followed by a design, followed by a procurement. So the question becomes, it does get a little complicated, and maybe we talk later about, depending on what comes out of the study, do you get a CM? Because if you get a CM again, like Fontaine or somebody else, you can do an early release package and buy some stuff early. Again, with with planning and budgeting and procurement and funding and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, I got to be honest with you, I'm not up enough on the state of the existing building because, frankly, we were getting rid of it, right? So
exactly.
So I'm going to be learning more about it. I mean, I might defer to Eric and Christina a little bit more on that as far as what to do next or right away. I mean, obviously, it's that. How much money do you spend on something you're hoping to actually put a more long-term solution in place? But
yeah, exactly.
The roof starts leaking tomorrow, you've got to do something to the roof. Libraries and water don't mix well. So it's, it's a hard question. I defer to Eric on that.
Yeah, well, which is why we're passing it on to the experts here. But it's not like we expect an answer today. But I wanted to put that on your plate so we can be thinking about it as we go. Al.
Sure. Just getting back to the question about the Zoom meeting, and it looks like they're allowed until through March 31st of this year.
Okay. Thank you. Lee? You're muted.
Okay, now can you hear me?
It's good, yes.
Okay, on the heating coils, I think we may want to consider asking the fire department, if Maureen hasn't already addressed this, to assess whether we have an immediate risk that should be taken care of. I mean, if we have a risk of fire at any old time because of those, the fire department can say these coils have to be replaced out of the contingency that the town keeps for all of a sudden, emerging risky situations. So we might want to think about that. I don't know if they weighed in on it already before, Maureen, when it first happened.
They have not.
I think we need to ask them, should these be replaced and then, essentially immediately? If it's in your house, you'd say, I'm not going to have any of those other ones running in the house. You know what I mean?
Eric?
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
part of the answer to Lee's question, Maureen is reaching out to has already reached out to the mechanical contractor to ask. So some of that's being answered. So.
Yeah, I have a meeting with him tomorrow.
Eric?
I was going to suggest, Ed, that maybe you consider a, like a maintenance contract of some sort, where you get, I think Maureen's heading in the right direction, meeting with the HVAC contractor, but, you know, do whatever kind of maintenance with the understanding that, you know, in a period of 4 to 5 years, you're probably gonna be replacing these units. So you don't wanna, you know, put a lot of money into it, but you want to make sure that they're going to continue to operate and function as they're supposed to. Sometimes it can be just, you know, can be dust buildup in a motor, something catches fire. You know, I had a bathroom fan go up in my house, and that was the culprit. So a little bit of little more targeted maintenance, I guess I would say, would be recommended.
I mean, I think we have a maintenance contract for the
We do.
HVAC system as a whole, yeah. So I'm not
Yep.
sure the details, but
In this case, it was a part that just completely gave out. It was time. It was old age.
the other thing that I want to point out is the building's 40 years old. A lot of the stuff in the building is 40 years old. And we happen to have this heating coil or fan coil or whatever fail. But, you know, next month it could be a piece of plumbing or the roof leaking or who knows what. And so I don't think we want to focus too much on just that particular problem.
I mean, I also think that as part of the study, right, you know, now Eric's team is going to have to actually look at the HVAC system, right? Because they're not taking it out anymore. Now we're looking at, you know, short-term, long-term, right? Because now you're going to actually get more of a study of what's there as opposed to lopping it off. And yeah, maybe we're replacing it, but I think even in, you know, to your question, Ed, I think you're going to get more insight into an answer to that, you know, with, you know, obviously with a yes at town meeting, you know, over these next few months, you'll learn more about the existing building because now we're living with it. So I think that's, you know, you might not have the answers now, but we may have more, you know, as we get to summertime.
I will say replacing the HVAC system is on the list of things. I forget whether it's a priority 1 or a priority 2, but it's definitely on the list. So we're looking at if we were to do nothing, a few years, 3 or 4 years for something to go wrong. Anyway, which would be nothing if it were new, but at 40 years, it's starting to worry. Okay.
One last statement, getting back to Pete's question, is it a 10-year? We're already 15 years out. We're 5 years before we get the building done, let alone.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I didn't mean to suggest that there wasn't, I didn't mean it to come across as suggesting that there wasn't maintenance being done. I just, that wasn't the intent. I just thought that maybe some special targeted maintenance could be a benefit, so.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on other building related discussion? So I heard a suggestion that we have our next meeting a week from today. So I believe that's Tuesday the 7th. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, Tuesday the 7th on Zoom at 3:30. Okay. So that's that is our plan. And Eric will be looking to see an estimate by then, and hopefully with enough time to think about it before we get there. Lee, you've got your hand up.
Now, just before we adjourn, I wanted you to know, because she worked so much on the 300th anniversary, in case you didn't know, that Nancy Perkins died over the weekend. And she had been extremely active on the 300th anniversary, and I think worked with Maureen, and was an old townie and a very funny, lovely, engaging person. And unfortunately ended up with a terminal illness earlier in her life than you would want anyone to have. But so you know, and there will be some services if you want to send a note or anything.
Thank you. Any other issues for the committee? And I believe we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, or seconded by Emery.
Okay, and I think Bill was the motion. Okay, I'll just go through the faces as I see them on the screen. Pete,
Yes, Dunbeck, yes.
Walter,
Leslie, yes.
Bob,
Petroselli, yes.
Sean,
EO, yes.
Bill,
Lenane, yes.
Lee,
Emery, yes. Thank you.
Al. Oh, I missed Marine. You're on mute, Al.
Saying yes.
It looks like a yes. I'm going to believe it's yes. Marine
Amy, yes.
and Ed Baldwin, yes. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your time, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
this time next week.